You ever stop and think about your job? Like, why is it set up the way it is? Why do you have one boss? Why are your tasks broken down into these tiny little steps? Well, I can tell you it is no accident. It's all by design, the result of this century-long, obsessive search to find the single best way to manage people. And that journey, well, it tells a pretty fascinating story about how we even think about work itself.
So let's rewind the clock to the turn of the 20th century. The Industrial Revolution is firing on all cylinders. Factors are everywhere, but inside, it's basically the Wild West. It's pure chaos. Work is inefficient, inconsistent, and it's all based on these old rule-of-thumb ways of doing things. This wasn't just a little messy, you guys. This was a huge economic headache, and that chaos was the perfect breeding ground for a brand new and honestly a pretty radical idea.
And that radical idea came from a guy named Frederick Winslow Taylor. He looked at all this chaos on the factory floor and thought, no, 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 no. This shouldn't be guesswork. It should be a science, as precise and predictable as building a bridge. He called his idea scientific management, and it was about to change, well, pretty much everything.
So what was his big idea? It was kind of like being a mechanic, but for a job. Taylor wanted to take every single job, break it down into its smallest possible parts, get out a stopwatch and time every little movement, and then get rid of any wasted motion. The holy grail for him was finding that one best way to do any task and then training every single worker to do it exactly that way.
But here's the thing, this wasn't just about the workers. Taylor's principles completely changed what it meant to be a manager. Before, managers were just bosses, but under this system, now they had to be scientists. Their job was to study the work, pick the perfect person, train them up, and then make sure the science was being followed to the letter. This was a total game changer for who was actually responsible for getting things done. Okay, to really get this, let's talk about his most famous experiment. It's all about a guy he called Schmidt, who was a pig iron handler. Taylor's pitch to him was simple and, well, super direct. He wasn't asking, are you happy? Are you fulfilled? Nope. He was betting on one core belief: money talks. He basically said, look, I can get you a nearly 60% pay raise, but you have to do exactly what I say when I say it. So Taylor's team gets out their stopwatches, and they study this job like crazy. And what they found was kind of mind-blowing and totally counterintuitive. Get this. To be the most productive handling these giant 92-pound blocks of iron, a worker only needed to be actually working for 42% of the day. The secret, the crucial finding, was that he needed to rest for the other 58%. Yeah, you heard that right. So suddenly, the manager's job was to be a human metronome, telling Schmidt exactly when to lift, when to walk, and most critically, when to just sit down and take a break. And the results? Oh, they were absolutely insane. Okay, so your average guy was loading about 12.5 tons a day. Schmidt, by following Taylor's exact instructions of work and rest, he loaded 47.5 tons. That is a nearly 280% jump from just one guy. It proved you could get these massive gains just by changing how you work, not who was doing the work. Okay, so while Taylor is down on the factory floor with his stopwatch, getting into the nitty-gritty, there's this French engineer, Henri Fayol, and he's looking at the whole problem from like a 30,000-foot view. He wasn't obsessed with the individual task. No, he was trying to figure out how to build the perfect organizational machine. And Fayol came up with these principles of management that, honestly, are the DNA of most companies today. The idea that you should only have one boss? That's unity of command. That's Fayol. Or the idea that management should build team spirit? He called that esprit de corps. These are things we totally take for granted now, but he's the guy who literally wrote the blueprint for how a modern company should be structured. So you can really think of them as two sides of the same coin. Taylor was the ultimate micromanager, obsessed with perfecting the individual cog. Fayol, he was the grand architect, designing the whole engine from the top down. But here's what they had in common. They both saw the company as a machine that could be tuned for perfection. They just started working on different parts of it. So you put these two ideas together, and what do you get? You get this classical model of management, this super efficient, logical, structured machine. But for all its genius, this machine model had a huge, glaring blind spot. It was missing something really, really important. And that missing piece? It was us, the people. This whole classical way of thinking treated people like, well, cogs in a machine. You could just swap one out for another. But
what if that's not how people work? What if workers were, people? That one question kicked off the next big earthquake in management theory, the human relations movement.
This whole shift really exploded because of something called the Hawthorne experiments. It's a fantastic story. Researchers go into a factory to see if better lighting makes people more productive. They crank up the lights and boom, productivity goes up. Easy, right? But then, just to be sure, they dimmed the lights back down. And guess what? Productivity went up again. They had stumbled onto something huge. It wasn't about the lights at all. It was about the simple fact that someone was paying attention to the workers. For the first time, management had to deal with this crazy idea that feelings and social connections and feeling like you matter actually make people work better. Who knew?
So this new focus on the human side of things really paved the way for the next giant in this story, a guy who's basically called the father of modern management, Peter Drucker. And what he did was genius. He took the efficiency-first ideas of Taylor and Fail, mixed in the people-first ideas from the Hawthorne studies, and blended them together to create the management playbook we pretty much all use today. Maybe Drucker's biggest aha moment was realizing the era of Schmidt and his pig iron was on its way out. Way back in 1959, he came up with this term, the knowledge worker. He saw a future where the real value wasn't going to come from muscle, but from your brain, from solving problems, from being creative, from analyzing things. And he knew one thing for sure: you can't manage a brain with a stopwatch. You can really nail down Drucker's whole philosophy with one of his most famous quotes. Management is doing things right. Leadership is doing the right things. See, for him, being efficient, doing things right, was still super important. Of course it was. But it wasn't the main event. The real goal for a leader was doing the right things in the first place. It was this massive shift from just focusing on the process to focusing on the purpose. Okay, so after this 100-year-long quest for the one best way to manage, where did we end up? We've gone from the stopwatch to the human heart, from process to purpose, and all of that evolution leads us to one final, really powerful idea that defines modern management, something called contingency theory. Contingency theory is basically the big "it depends" answer to everything we've been talking about. It argues there is no one-size-fits-all best way to manage. Period. The most effective approach is completely, contingent on the situation. The whole game now is about matching your leadership style to your team and to the specific job at hand. And this isn't just theory, it's super practical. Think about it. If you're in a full-blown crisis, you need a boss who gives clear, direct orders, right? That's a task-oriented style. But try using that same style on a team trying to brainstorm a new creative idea. It would be a total disaster. For that, you need a more collaborative, relationship-focused leader. So what does this all mean? It means the best managers aren't rigid. They're like chameleons. They adapt. So here we are. After 100 years of searching for that one magic bullet, the big reveal is that there isn't one. The real best way is actually a mix of everything we've talked about. You need a little bit of Taylor's precision, some of File's structure, a whole lot of that human insight, and definitely Drucker's focus on purpose. So I'll leave you with this. Think about your own job. Do you feel the ghost of Taylor's stopwatch looking over your shoulder? Or are you living in the world of Drucker's knowledge worker? The answer probably tells you everything you need to know about the kind of work you do every single day.